Aloha. Oh my goodness, I cannot begin to tell you how wonderful it is to say that. E como mai, which means welcome home, which means welcome to where you are. This morning, I had an opportunity to drive in on H1. It's my first time since I've been on H1 that I've been back to Hawaii. And I have to tell you that it was an amazing experience for me to truly be in that movement and have all the memories flood in of the last 10 to 12 years. Do you have an experience like that in your life where, okay, I'm just going to put the mask down. where you just absolutely are stunned and amazed at all that has transpired. The most important thing for me to remember today is that it is all holy. It's all unfolding in perfection. I come back to you today in Hawaii from a land far, far away known as Texas. It was quite an amazing adventure. You see, as soon as I arrived there, a global pandemic took place. And what I said to someone at the time that I arrived was, you know, for years I've been praying, been holding a consciousness, an intention that I would have an opportunity to do church in a whole new way. And they said, "So this is your fault, huh?" Well, you know, it's not exactly in the way that shows up. The truth is that we have been filled with opportunity as human beings over the course of the last 8 months. And there has been quite a bit of sadness and releasing and letting go that's been taking place as well. It's not all about rainbows, unicorns, and daffodils. It is indeed about a transformation that takes place when we're willing to allow the Christ to be born in us. In any month other than December, in any month that may show up. This morning, I'm deeply appreciative that Johanna and Cindy were willing to light the Christ candle, to light the candle of hope and faith, and to light the candle of peace. This morning, as I was passing on H1, as I come back to this place where I was a ministerial intern for quite some time, as I feel these memories flood in me, there's a sense of overwhelming joy that it's a little confusing. Perhaps you've had this experience before as well, of where the joy becomes so much that you start to cry. And in that moment, it's still quite amazing because the bodily experience is still a bit confusing. It's like, so what am I sad about? I'm not sad about anything. I am so filled with joy that the emotion must flow out or flood forth in some way that can be expressed in this bodily form. It's Christmas. It's the time of Advent. It's a time when we recognize that the Christ is born incarnate, in body. And that body is you. The Christ is born in you. And on this second Sunday of Advent, when we look at the idea of Christ being born in us, the second Sunday is the Christ being born through peace. In our expression in our lives through peace. This morning, I've had a huge amount of energy and activity shifting in so many different ways. I shared with you the emotional experience of what it was like to have this overwhelming joy that also feels like sadness. I'll let you know as well that minutes before I was to come and share my spiritual experience and the talk, I was told that we wouldn't have the slides. And lo and behold, we have the slides. There's a shift and a change that continues to go take place in our world today. It even shows up in the form of, so what do I do with this now? How can we shift into that place of peace with these constant changes that are going on in our lives? How can we shift into that place of peace when there is this side saying that and the other side saying that, and there's that opposition in the midst? Where is that place of peace? In many ways, it seems that that place of peace is nowhere in our world, except that place of peace resides right within you. That place of peace that passes all understanding is what is within every single one of us. So now, no matter what emotional response may be showing up for you, whether it's anger or fear or even rage or sadness, or for that matter, joy, love. In the midst of love, there is the ever-present place of peace within us. This second week of Advent is a time when we can honor the place of peace that is never absent. It never leaves from us. This place of peace has always been here. In my adventures to Texas, yes, I can still say that. In my adventures to Texas, I wanted to see, reveal, and know within me that that place of peace was never absent. For that matter, it became the objective of everything that I do in my life, to remember that that place of peace, the heaven that resides within me, is never absent and not dependent on outer circumstances. This spiritual community has been a source of joy and celebration for many, many people. One of the ways that recently someone shared with me their experience of having celebration at Unity Church of Hawaii, and for that matter, in many Unity churches all around the world, many people have an experience of the peace song. It's that moment when at the very end we are actually gathered together with our hands clasped with one another, where we're singing out loud and we're rejoicing that we can declare that that I can let there be peace on earth. It's a beautiful thing to remember, a beautiful thing to hold in our hearts. And now we have to be 6 feet apart. And now the Zamar asks us that they'd like to sing for us, that please don't sing. So what can sometimes happen in our human experience is that place of peace, that place of joy that I had within me, it's gone, it's absent. Where's it gone? It's never left you. It's a light that shines within you and has never been absent. We can remember this place of peace by just shifting our attention to our hearts, by shifting our attention to a single candle surrounded by other candles. This place of peace is the light that shines forever in our world. What can take place in the Christ is when there's those opposing voices. One says this, the other says that. There's that place in between where peace rests. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. Each of us seeks for peace in our lives and in our world. If we remember that that peace resides within us, it is never dependent on outer circumstances. It is always dependent on what's within us. So, is this spiritual transformation something that takes place in a solitary way? Is it something that we should probably go off to the mountains and find our own personal cave and be separate from other people because they're disturbing our peace? Where can I find peace in my life and in my world? Well, the truth of it is that peace is also about the connection that we have. That place where we are actually with, for, and belonging to one another. The master teacher knew exactly this. He once was referring to that place of peace that resides within us in the Gospel according to Matthew. For where 2 or 3 gather together, because they are mine, I will be right there among them. That place of the Christ, that place of peace, is that place between us. It's that metaphysical, magical space between us where we are in relationship and in depth with one another. We can remember this truth by centering into the Christ essence that resides in us. Earlier in the service, we spoke to the essence of God that resides in every single one of us. You see, through the Advent season, we ignite these powers, these divine ideas to shine forth in our world, in our own individual lives, and they show up in our relationships. What's interesting to note is that there is a story that's going on in our world that says that if only those people would start acting correctly, well, the interesting thing is that those people are also saying, well, if only those people would act. So there seems to be this oppositional thing that continually takes place. But there's an incredible thing that can take place in our hearts if we simply listen. Not with our ears, actually, but listen with our hearts. In our human experience, we all have needs. And sometimes those needs don't always get met through the course of a relationship. If we were truly to take the time to listen with our hearts, which is something that's been taking place in this spiritual community for quite some time, there's been a concerted effort in order for each other to listen to one another and listen to everyone in the world with our hearts. We can make a difference in this world, and we can experience a transformation within. Let's take the time to listen with our hearts. Because you see that place of peace? It's shining in you. It's shining in every one of us. If we remove the blockages and remove the things that we've placed in the way that at one time might have protected us, but it's now keeping us separate. Let's find a way to listen with our hearts and live in the manifestation of peace in our world. Advent, as many of you know, actually Reverend Margie just this last week referred to what Advent is. It's the weeks before the actual time of Christ's birth. And these weeks that go up into that are represented by 4 divine ideas. And these divine ideas are what reside in every one of us. The co-founder of the Unity movement, Charles Fillmore, once wrote that everything is first an idea in mind. And this law holds good not only in the creations of God, but in the forms made by man as well. As we manifest and bring forth the idea of peace in our lives and in our world, we can then experience a greater sense of the Christ, of the God essence that we're meant to be. May we manifest that idea today by removing the blockages and being willing to be heard, and perhaps being willing to listen with our hearts. These 4 divine ideas that are taking place through the course of the Advent season are faith, and the second week is peace. There's also love and joy. So this Christmas, I wonder if you haven't before, would consider the possibility of focusing on these expressions of Christmas. Because you see, the birth of the Christ in you is the most significant message that's contained in Christmas. Yes, it's a beautiful thing that 2,000 years ago, the example that we follow for spiritual awakening was born. But what he was saying was that God incarnate is living in you as well, not just in him. We can recognize how this place of peace is meant to be birthed and lit and shone brightly in our world and in our lives. In the Gospel according to John, the master teacher Jesus once, yes, this is the other thing about having the slides sometimes work and not sometimes work. I'm going to ask you to claim an affirmation with me. We've already had quite a few this morning, but here's just one more that you can walk away with any one that works, or for that matter, if you're willing to remember them all, that would be a spectacular and amazing thing. Let's declare this powerful affirmation out loud together. I am a light for peace in the world. That's who you are. That's who you can be. If we're willing to remove the blockages that are blocking the light. If we're willing to at least relight and reignite the candle in order to be the presence of peace in the world. In the Gospel according to John, the master teacher Jesus once said, I leave the gift of peace with you, my peace. Not the kind of fragile peace given by the world, but my perfect peace. Don't yield to fear or be troubled in your hearts. Instead, be courageous. Let's be fearless in our seeking for peace. Because you see, in the place of being fearless, if we're willing to come from courage, the root word of courage is the Latin cur, which actually means heart. If we come from this truly courageous, authentic place, then we follow what the master teacher Jesus was referring to. We follow in the footsteps of peace in order to ignite that peace into our lives. You see, he stated that he came to bring peace. And it was a peace that was much more significant than what anyone had experienced up until that point. We can be courageous, we can be fearless today in order to experience and be the peace that hasn't been seen or felt or heard or known up until now. At the time of Jesus, there was an idea that was known as Pax Romana, which meant that the Roman Empire was going to impose peace upon the entire empire. And the way that peace was imposed was that everyone had to act or show up or be a particular way. If you were a slave, you had to be that way. If you were a nobleman, you had to be that way. Jesus was talking about something beyond roles that were imposed upon each other or imposed upon ourselves. It was speaking to a freedom of peace that is authentic and at the core of our hearts. You see, the peace that passes all understanding is not a matter of imposing peace. Many of us who have had mothers have known that our mothers were deciding that they were going to impose peace. And oftentimes that was a necessary thing. It was something that was really required for continuing the life of having a family and having a home. However, sometimes in our lives, we might be walking around with what might be sometimes termed as baggage around that. Perhaps we can be courageous enough to release the baggage of whatever might have told us at one time that we had to be courageous or that we had to have this peace imposed upon us. We can instead be authentic to who we are. Let's release and let go of the imposing peace and instead live in the peace that comes from within us. A place of connection and heart, a place of connecting and honoring one another, a place of community, exactly what this spiritual community stands for and lives within. The Apostle Paul was inspired with the life of Jesus, inspired with the life of the Christ. And he once wrote when he was talking with his friends in Philippi, "And know that the peace of God, a peace that is beyond any and all of our human understanding, will stand watch over your hearts and minds in Jesus, the Anointed One." The Anointed One is not just one person from 2,000 years ago. The Anointed One is you and me. We are here anointed in the Christ essence. Anointed in this brilliant, radiant light of Advent. We can awaken to this possibility of who we can be in the world. Are you willing to celebrate Christmas with me more than just something that takes place on December the 25th? But Christmas that takes place throughout the entire year. This birthing of the Christ is something that we can commemorate during the season of Advent, or for that matter on December the 25th. But the birthing of the Christ is what can make the most significant difference in every one of us, if we're willing to ignite these ideas of peace. The Apostle Paul spoke more to this idea of how we could ignite this light of peace. He wrote to friends of his in the church in Ephesus. This is known as Ephesians 4:2-4. With tender humility and quiet patience, always demonstrate gentleness and generous love toward one another, especially toward those who may try your patience. Do you have someone in your life who occasionally tries your patience? Paul is suggesting that perhaps with tender humility and quiet patience, we can respond to them. Be faithful to guard the sweet harmony of the Holy Spirit among you in the bonds of peace, being one body and one Spirit. As you were all called into the same glorious hope of divine destiny. When we recognize our oneness with God, we recognize how we come together in wholeness. The very things that may be the thing that activates those who are pointing to them and those who are pointing back at those is that is something that resides within us. if I truly come to a wholeness, a love, and a peace to every aspect of me, then I truly do birth the Christ today in fullness and in wholeness. The season of Advent, the season of Christmas, is all about love. Jesus came to teach the principle and the idea of love. And boy, oh boy, don't we recognize in the midst of a global pandemic, in the midst of all of the things that have been sparked and that seems to sometimes be raging in our world today, it seems like that whole idea of love is a hugely tall order. But I believe that each of us is up to it. I believe that that light of peace that shines within you is definitely up to it. This light of love and this light of acceptance and completion shines not only in the message according to Jesus, but it also shines in numerous other disciplines and philosophies and religions in the whole world. Thich Nhat Hanh is a modern master of Buddhism. He once wrote, "No single tradition monopolizes the truth. We must glean the best values of all traditions and work together to remove the tensions between traditions in order to give peace a chance." Let's give peace a chance today. Let's be willing to live in the peace of God by understanding the differences, by listening with our heart. You see, if we are actually in that space in between, that's where the Christ idea is birthed. It may seem that there are opposing forces. In our human condition, there are so many people who are very willing to point to those opposing forces. However, what we are called to do is to bring the idea and the light of peace to every situation and every circumstance. Let's be the light of the world. In this Christmas season, we can ignite that truth of peace in everything that we do. These many different pathways to God take so many different forms. And if we recognize that they are the true essence and the true teaching, they bring us to a deeper sense of the peace of God. From a pathway known as A Course in Miracles, it's once written, "The peace of God passeth your understanding only in the past." Yet here it is, and you can understand it now. God loves his Son forever, and his Son returns his Father's love forever. Now, even though that sounds like the God up in the sky is loving us down here, and we're supposed to love the God up in the sky, what it's actually talking about is the same thing that Jesus was referring to, that space in between. You see, God's Son loves the Father. You, as creative principle, can love and be in this wondrous cycle of love. We can be present to how we have these wonderful memories of standing and holding hands and singing out loud, "Let there be peace on earth." Yet we can also make certain that it's taking place within us. You see, even though there are circumstances beyond our control that seem to be imposing their way upon us, they're actually protecting and giving us opportunities for growth. Just like a mother. This wondrous, loving mother, God, is bringing forth and birthing a new idea of peace in our world. You are an essential part of that. You have come along in this vast universe to be expressed as you, and your divine appointment is today. It's right now. Let's birth the peace of God in this holiday season. Let's acknowledge the advent that comes forth in wondrous light. Let's recognize that life everlasting is taking place in you and is living as peace in you. Join with me once more to declare this powerful truth. Let's say it out loud together. I am a light for peace in the world. I know that you are. I know that I am. I know that we are a wondrous place of peace. I know that Merry Christmas is so much more than just some words. It's the truth of who we are. And so we let it be.